Welcome to the Journos podcast. I'm Peter Martin, delighted to say I'm joined by Alison McConnell, Hugh McDonald and Andrew H. Smith. Do you still have the H, by the way? Have you dropped it?
The H has been dropped. The H has been dropped.
Okay, and we will, before the end of the programme, give you the website to put your name to bring back the H at some point later on. But great to have Andrew with us. We'll determine that by the end of the programme. Great to have you with us. We've got lots to talk about. Can Scotland maintain the coefficient? We're going to obviously talk about the Scottish Premiership as well. Trevor Francis was a £1 million player back in 1979, but suddenly, yet again, the EPL has an inflated transfer market with prices going through the roof. What effect will Saudi Arabia's desire also to try and buy up some of the world's greatest players? Are they guilty of sports washing? Are we in the UK and possibly Europe guilty of hypocrisy when we are so aghast at what they are doing? And as a bit of fun, I've got the guys to write down their top 10. I always include you as a guy, but it's just a term, you know, rather than the way the 21st century is going.
Me as a guy as well. Exactly. I'm kind of fluid.
So Ali's one of the Fox. Yes. So Guy H. Fox. So Alison and Andrew and of course Hugh and myself are going to pick our top 10 greatest players of all time. The only thing that probably, or your favourite world players, the only thing that will determine probably the differences between us all might be the order of who we think 1, 2, 3 and 4 are going to be, but nevertheless it's all a bit of fun. You can add to it yourself on our feed here, and don't forget, hit the subscribe button to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel and you'll get so many different programmes to enjoy right across the board. There's so much happening over this new season, and thank you to so many of you for supporting us. The figures are magnificent from last season, and with all the programmes coming on board, hopefully there's something there to whet your appetite. So with that in mind, of course, I'm looking at the way the Scottish Premiership has started. Don't want to kind of date the programme at any point with talking about specific games, but overall, who do you think needs the most signings as far as the clubs before the window closes, Andrew?
Well, I saw Stephen McLean saying the other day he needed 5 signings. That's probably a bare minimum for him, but he's a St Johnstone manager. You don't get 5 signings in the last few weeks, towards the end of the window. So I mean, his need as it stands would appear to be greater than anyone else's.
Yeah, the funny thing is you don't get 5 signings. I remember Lee Johnson saying, Hugh, I need 5 transfer windows.
Definitely don't get 5 transfer windows.
Well, good luck with that if you're struggling domestically. I know he had a good result in Europe, Lee Johnson, but he's been less than compelling in the SPFL. I agree with Andrew. I mean, people say it's too early to judge, and well, it's never too early. You don't want to make extraordinary judgments in early games, but you've got to make judgments, and that's what. And if you're looking at that, you're looking at. I think St Johnstone, you're walking into flashing lights and a siren at the moment in there, because they're saying to themselves, it's not as if they've come off 3 or 4 really good seasons and then hit a bad season. They've come off a couple of really ropey seasons. We know during COVID won terrific 2 cups. Well, last season they battled to and got through, and you said to yourself, well, this is a club that in so many ways, apart from in the boardroom, at management level, playing level, because a lot of the players had reached the end, really needs a revamp. So yeah, I think St Johnstone, and I think as well, is this the week or the year or the months going past that you start asking questions about Livingston? I've always asked questions about Livingston and been wrong. I've always said I believe football is budgets. You know, it's you get what you pay for, and they've outpunched that. But can they do it for always?
You know, I know. You're trying to defy gravity forever.
Well, I mean, the general. Well, I wonder if you remember how many managers sacked last season. It's quite incredible how many in the Scottish Premiership were sacked over the course of the season. 8 managers. And of those 8 managers that I'm looking at, I put a list together. Graham Alexander was first out the door. Then it was Jack Ross with his 7 games at Dundee United. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, Jim Goodwin, who's now back in a job, Stephen Hamill, Liam Fox, Robbie Nielsen, and Callum Davison. Is there a need this year? It's always critical every year for the financial rewards, but is there a need this year for chairmen, chief executives, owners to maybe show a little bit more patience in this, or do you think we're already talking about Stephen McLean?
I hear what you're saying and understand. I think there's a need to hold your nerve at times, but to do so, I think you need to see something. I think you need to be able to hang your belief on a tangible belief that there's something there. I think if you don't see it, then I think the reality of life is that people cannot afford to drop. They cannot afford to go down a division. It's not like in England where you have that parachute payment that buffers you from the financial realities of going down a league. So I think I agree that you want to give people time to get it right, but the reality is that you can't always accommodate that. If you don't think that there's anything there that offers an indication of it getting better, I just don't think you can afford to.
I agree. I think there's certain things in football that are really just daft sayings, and one of them was you've got to give a manager time. It's really a daft saying because we know the rightness of it, but it's like me saying, well, I wish I had hair and a winning personality. It's just madness. It's not going to happen.
We were saying off camera.
I mean, but it's just not going to happen.
I'll take your hair then.
There's a lot of contradiction to that in Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, well, there'll be contradictions to it, but is the Nottingham Forest such a big contradiction? Because if the club strategy is saying, this is the best guy we can get, we know we're going to struggle all season, and we hope we get out of the struggle. If that's your strategy, well, the strategy was there was no reason to sack their manager because they stuck with him all season, they knew they were going to be in a relegation battle, and they get out of it. So there was a strategy there. But if you're like Chelsea and you say, well, our strategy is to win the league and the Champions League, how long do you give a Graham Potter? And people say, he never got enough time. But again, that's going back to clubs are not going to give you time.
Jack Ross is the ultimate argument for me, because I went to the game up at Tannadice where they defeated AZ Alkmaar 1-0. I thought, Jack Ross, if he's allowed time here, he could build something. 7 games later, he's booted out the door, Andrew.
And the worst of the Jack Ross decision, and God love him, I've got nothing against Liam Fox, but you have to think, well, if we're getting rid of Jack Ross, then we have to bring in someone who we think is better. And there was no empirical evidence that Liam Fox would be better. He was elevated beyond any position he'd had in the game in frontline management. You know, that was his first opportunity for it. So sometimes, if you just get rid for the sake of getting rid, that shows a kind of lack of foresight.
But there's certain results that you've got to say, like, you could have, the best manager in the world at certain places, and then you say, can you survive a 7-0 and a 9-0?
I know. Well,
I actually think in many ways, if you're a boardroom manager, you could say, do you know what? Alkmaar away was such Celtic at home. These were outlier results. But the noise around football is that I don't know. I thought as soon as when I saw and I think Jack Ross is a good coach.
He thought he was going. Were you there that day? Because when he came out,
to speak to Celtic.
He thought he was going, but it was the same with Jim Goodwin. I was at Dartford that night as well.
Yeah.
I think I've just about got over it. Having you know what a press box was.
Yeah.
It was a garden bench, and we said. But there's people standing in front of us. We can't actually see the game.
Never bothered me that when I was writing my support.
We don't have any seats.
To be fair, by the way, Andrew, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there were some journalists in the 70s in your fraternity who never saw the game but still sent a match report back. So I wouldn't worry about that. But they
saw pink elephants.
By the way, pink elephants, so it must have been a cocktail. But with that point in mind, we're talking about signings, we're talking about sackings. When you look at the way the teams are now, we're already highlighting 2 or 3 that we think are going to be struggling at the bottom end. The top end is a different scenario because Rangers have already had 9 signings in, more to come maybe, which I think Rangers fans would certainly like to see. Even Brendan Rodgers is looking and I think some Celtic fans are looking and saying, well, at the top end, they're confident they're going to win the league, but they still think there's 2 or 3 half-decent signings still to be announced. Is that a fair comment?
I think Celtic look a weaker team this season than what they did last season. I think they've lost a bit of depth, they've lost a bit of quality when you look at the players who have gone out. I don't think there's any doubt that they need a couple in before the window. I think they probably have enough domestically. I think you could make an argument to say, but I think the challenge for Celtic is to go and try and compete this season on a two-pronged front. They want to be doing something in Europe. Again, that's an interesting question about what Celtic's ambitions should be in a European sense, but certainly I think they need a couple more in.
Yeah,
I think they need 4, and I think they'll get 4. And I think they need 4 starters, and I think they know.
And where do you think those players are?
I think they know they need 4 starters as well, and I think Brendan, who's been very quiet at the moment and not rocked any boats, I think he's come back to Celtic Park in many ways a different man. The rest of it gets older and he gets it. But I think, and I think at the very top as well, they're saying, do you know what? We need 4 strong players in here. I think they need a goalkeeper. I think they need a left back. I think Greg Taylor. I was a big critic of Greg Taylor, and to many ways, when I say critic, I didn't think he was, going to be a Celtic starter. I thought he was a Celtic squad player. In many ways, he proved me wrong last year. I thought he was terrific last year. But I think in the system and the way he is this year, and the way he started this year, I think, and Bernabei is obviously in many ways not the answer, because he's done the daft thing. He's fallen out with 2 managers almost immediately for disciplinary reasons. So I think they'll get a left back. I certainly think they need a left winger and they need a striker. So that would be the 4 that I would go for.
And of the 4, Andrew, I'm still of the opinion you don't come back to Celtic to win trebles. If you're coming back, he must have had a conversation to say, if I'm coming back, I need to sign a calibre of player that's going to achieve the remit that you're giving me, which is, can I get them out of the group stage of the Champions League?
That's why he left. I mean, he was wanting to sign Castagna, so they said they could get him for 8 million, and then they said, well, what about his wages? Well, 55 grand a week. It's like, what? This is Celtic, and this is what he wanted. But he said he's come back and he's realised you just have to accept, you have to deal with your limitations. As Clint Eastwood said, a man's got to know his limitations.
I never thought we were going to get Clint Eastwood in our first Journos podcast, but nevertheless he's in. Can I just say,
did he shoot 5 or did he shoot 6?
Yeah, exactly. Can I just say something to you though? Realistically, I don't think, and I think he was a Dermot appointment, but I don't think he sat down. He could have sat it out for a year and waited, and there would have been another English Premier League.
Absolutely.
Dermot Desmond,
Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. Dermot Desmond must have sat him down, had the call and said, look, this time around, because he's still got to convince him to come back. There's 2 elements to the Beecher's Brook here. One of them is, by the way, some of the fans are raging with you because you declared your love and your off-skate.
Dermot Desmond almost likes that fact that he would like cock a snook at the fans by bringing them back.
But that's fine, but he still had to have the conversation to say, this is how it's going to be different. If you come back, you might not think, oh, there's no way I'm coming back, but if you come back, I'm going to give you this, the bit that you didn't have before.
I don't think so, to be honest with you. Celtic don't change their strategy. They might change their strategy in as much as they have 50 million in the bank. They've got more money than they've ever had. So ergo, they've got more money to spend.
They'll never break the structure.
You spend what you earn, but you have to also keep. It was quite interesting, the whole Bernabei drink driving court case. It was interesting. His defence lawyer, saying his wage was 5 grand a week, which is nothing. So Celtic are still bringing in these guys, hoping to. They still hope to keep some of your first players, your kind of lesser spotted kind of first team squad members. You still don't want to be pushed beyond 12, 15. That's been the same way for 15 years.
But with all due respect, the difference in the last 4 or 5 years with Celtic is you can have a 5 grand a week level player because he's better than the other 10. He's better than the other 10 teams. That 5 grand player, you can suddenly say, by the way, we're playing Morton in the League Cup, you're in. By the way, we've got a Champions League game coming up, you're in for this game against.
That's the problem.
Every now and then you can come a cropper.
They'll always get caught between two stools.
That's the problem.
They're not good enough for the Champions League. They showed that last season, whatever people say, and I actually thought they performed better than I expected them to. But they still, if you look at just the results in themselves, and I know Postecoglou would like throw up his hands in horror if you're saying, because he used to say, why do you bother watching the games if all you're caring about is the result? Why don't you just look at the scoreboard? Well, I do look at the scoreboard, and at the end, and I decide. I don't decide on everything that's gone before, but I decide whether ultimately a team's had a good night or a bad night.
The problem with everyone, and when we're journalists watching Scottish football, is we've been spoiled early 2000s, because apart from anything else, Rangers and Celtic delivered some fantastic games of that Champions League emblem billowing.
The finances were very, very
Peter,
different.
once one of those clubs went burst, right?
Absolutely.
And the other one had £70 million of debt when Martin O'Neill left.
Let's not get into the negatives of it. I'm just talking about the
But
great.
that, because everyone, it goes back to that point, every one of them is it's all about finances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like see, if you go back to my era as a kid and that, the Lisbon Lions, right? The Lisbon Lions would never have been Lisbon Lions in the modern era, because see, when they going up against Liverpool in the semi-final, the Cup Winners' Cup the year before, the big clubs of now, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas and all that, would say, we're taking Lennox and Johnston and Murdoch.
Yeah.
They don't have Monaco a couple of years ago at the quarter-finals. Team rinsed. Ajax got to the semi-finals, probably should have got to the finals. Team rinsed. Even 2003, and they did well to hold from 2003 to 2004. But that wouldn't happen now.
But none of us
The
are
other
saying.
thing, but when you talk about the early 2000s and Celtic and Rangers competing in the Champions League, Celtic signed Neil Lennon, Chris Sutton, Alan Thompson. You think of players like that who were at a decent level in the English Premiership, financially that is gone.
Well, you look at the wages of Hartson, for example, the early 2000s, what was Henrik on? I don't know, I never saw his tax returns. But I'm thinking Henrik's on high 30s.
He got to 40
Sorry, 40.
By the last
42.
So say Henrik's on 40 20 years ago, or the best part of 20 years ago. Nobody's near 40 at Celtic
No.
20 years on.
No.
And football wages have gone through the roof.
Exactly, that's championship money.
Exactly.
When you compare it to that, and you think of that Rangers team, Dutch internationals,
Nationals.
first choice
but do you
Dutch
remember it?
internationals.
The reason I'm saying that to you is because I was trying to quickly look up to try and say to you guys, do you remember the situation where Rangers played Monaco? And at that point, there was a genuine feeling because of Rangers' performance that they were going to go on and win the Champions League.
Yeah.
Do you remember that
Was,
team?
yeah.
I mean, that team was absolutely just rippling with fantastic players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the summer before, that was the record spend by a British club. You can't quite believe that happened in Scotland.
A British
the
club,
record spend by a British club, I think it was 29 million Advocates spent.
Exactly. And then you look at when you go back and you start interviewing players from that era, and for retrospective pieces or European pieces, and you talk to somebody like Brad Fiedel, I was interviewing once, and he said, I could have been at Rangers, and he said, but I decided to go to Liverpool. There was more money for me at Rangers, but I went to Liverpool.
Yeah.
Well, here's-
What?
That's why De Boer came instead of Manchester United. He came to Rangers because there was more money.
Well, here's the Rangers team from that, from the game when Rangers won 1-0. Klaus, Amoruso, Newman, Ferguson, Van Bronckhorst, Moles, who was a great player, Reina, Ronald De Boer, Conterman, Tugai, and Johnson.
Yeah.
I think it was Alan Johnson.
I would be Alan Johnson. Alan Johnson's a
6
decent player as well.
Dutch starters.
So,
First team Dutch starters. in that.
I mean, that was...
And some of them there, you just have to look at the pedigree. Van Bronckhorst went on to play for Arsenal and Barcelona.
Yeah.
Won the Champions
The
League.
other thing, the point I'm making is, you touched on it there, Andrew. While we love European football, I love to hear the Champions League theme,
Oh,
because I think Celtic and Rangers fans of a nostalgic feeling think we should be there. We'd love them to be there because it's not really a Champions League, to be honest with you. But realistically, should we look at Celtic and Rangers and say, on the evidence of Rangers and in the early part of the 2000s, the evidence of Celtic as well, should we say you guys should be going to latter stages of Europa League or Conference League?
Yeah, that's all we should be saying. That's all we should be saying. And you might... I think Celtic actually missed an opportunity last year to finish third. I think we should have got to the Europa
League. Should have
League.
beaten Shakhtar.
Because Shakhtar were playing 100 miles away from their own country.
Missed a couple of sitters that night as well.
They'd had to sell players because of the war situation. Shakhtar shouldn't, but then Celtic were the only team that didn't take points off. Real Madrid coast through these group stages, don't care, can't even stretch the ball to put a
But let's
stretch
not
into
forget,
it.
Andrew, if you're talking about coefficients and how we want people to do well, Rangers were flying the flag for the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? They were propping up our coefficient.
The two things that have propped up the coefficient is Russia invading Ukraine, because they can't get any coefficient points, because they would have bumped Scotland down 1, and Rangers consistently reaching the quarterfinals of the Europa League.
Yeah,
But
and
just
that point is the key point here, Hugh. It brings us nicely onto, we are in, and I always used to think to myself, God, how many geeks have to sit and look through the coefficients and constantly, but I've now downloaded one on Twitter because I'm thinking this is getting a wee bit harum scarum. We're 9th on the evidence of where we could stretch to 2026 staying inside the top 10, but if it all goes pear-shaped and those 3 other clubs that we've got in Europe don't do what we want them to do, suddenly we could head down to 14th.
Easily.
Aye. And there would be no, again, and it's sorry to be repetitive, but football teams, by and large, teams will outpunch. We know Brighton's outpunched last year in the Premier League. There will be teams that outpunch by a mixture of good management, good recruitment, and a bit of luck.
Yeah.
Because there's a bit of luck in the Brighton thing. Everybody works at Brighton will tell you that. You know, we've got very good strategies, but we really, you were locked it. So you've really got, when you've got a fluid transfer system, which means that you can't build a team. I mean, I used to laugh at Brendan first time round when I was at press conferences. I want to build some here, and I felt like saying to him, what movie are you in? What are you going to build? Who are you going to build around? You're going to build around Joe Boggs, because Joe Boggs is away next week.
Andrew had a Jenga analogy with Ange when Ange was talking about building something, and Andrew was saying to him, it's like Jenga.
It's like Jenga tower. You try to go higher. As you try to go higher by adding pieces, then pieces are getting pulled out.
Well, you look at this.
Good analogy, mate. He said.
Well, you look at what I thought. I went to 2 Celtic Champions League games live last year. Donetsk and Real Madrid, and I thought Celtic were terrific for an hour against Real Madrid. Probably the best they could be. Everybody playing their best thing. And then, you're saying, how strong's Real Madrid that night? This is a day at the office for them. They're not, you know what I mean? They're saying we're going to be. And they ended up finalists. They're professional and they want to get it done, but it's not do or die. It's do or die for Celtic. But in the last half an hour, when your legs go, when the concentration goes because of fatigue, suddenly you get Vinicius, and I hate going back to Greg Taylor again, but you get Vinicius Junior, or Valverde on Greg Taylor. And you go, that's a social work case. You know, you're just saying there's, you know what I mean? That's
but with all due respect, apart from Real Madrid and Barcelona, a lot of other clubs, because of the spending of the English Premier League, are just as worried. Because there is a great imbalance happening, and English football is, so strong that they're always going to be in the latter stages. I'm going to digress for 1 minute because he said something which I think is great, a great line. It wasn't a great Australian impression, but
thanks very much.
Ange Postecoglou used to, when he first started, when he went into the press conference, he'd leather everybody that he thought was a stupid question. So I was on a stage with him one night, and I said to him, Ange, I said, this is just me and an observation of watching your early time, coming into Scotland. I said, but usually if somebody asks a question and you're not happy with it because you think it's a stupid question, I said, if you think the guy's a prick, you usually use the word mate right at the end of it. And he said, yeah, mate, I do. And he just looked at me and I went,
he's already started at Spurs. He's been really aggressive at Spurs. I mean, I love all that bit, and I see the purity of it. I see the purity of managers. I just finished a terrific Dutch biography of, obviously translated,
Dutch,
of Cruyff.
I tried to speak that bit, but it was all done Dutch.
But it was, Cruyff coming in.
You suggest him, honestly.
Cruyff coming in as manager of Ajax and saying after 4 games, he said, everybody's going on, you've lost 2 and you've drawn 1 and you just go over the line in the other one. And he said, yeah, but the performances are terrific. And this is one of the greatest football brains of all time, certainly one of the greatest football players of all time. In fact, one of the most influential.
You're stealing man.
I mean, but certainly top 10. Certainly one, and he's going like that. If you talk to Ange about it, you're looking at the scoreboard and saying, Pep all the time. Yeah. I don't care about winning games. It's, well, look, you can win, you can lose, but I thought it was a great performance in that. And that's not the reality of the business.
No, but can I tell you something? Just Ange Postecoglou as a side, and again, the great thing about this programme that I hope is we'll be able to duck and dive like a guy who's got the ball at his feet and just runs and does amazing, doesn't know where he's going.
Oh, you've taken that from him.
But Ange Postecoglou for me will get the bump because that is a club with three of the top European managers and bumped them.
Yeah.
So he, for me, you know, everybody's got ambition. Ange Postecoglou goes to Spurs and I'm thinking, don't go to Spurs. Spurs are like Sunderland. It's the end of your career. There's a buffer coming
I'm not so
now.
sure. I was mightily impressed with them in Sunday.
Very unlucky on Sunday.
And it was like watching. It's amazing because if you watch them under Conte, he's took these basically the same group of players. Within a couple of months, he schooled them to play a certain way. It was like watching Celtic with
Changing the
different
culture.
shirts.
You're trying to change the culture.
I
The very fact he's managed to change it.
I hope he's got the time to that. My point is this: Pochettino, good manager, Champions League. 5 months later, bumped. Mourinho wins trophies at every club he goes to. Semi-finals of the League Cup, got to the final, bumped. Don't let him get to the final. The next man in, bumped. Conte. You know, and again, if Antonio Conte sits at a press conference and says, by the way, the mindset of the players in here in this club is terrible.
But that was, he shouldn't have been allowed out of the press conference.
I'm not talking
it's the
about
same as Brendan in Athens. He shouldn't have been allowed out of the press conference. Somebody knocked the door and said, hey, Mr. Rodgers, can I interrupt your press conference here? Hey, I'm just come from the Celtic board. There's your P45 and a black bag. I mean...
but I'm not talking about Postecoglou's...
You can't do that about a club.
I'm not talking about Postecoglou's qualities as a manager. I'm talking about Daniel Levy and Joe Lewis's record for not sticking by a plan and derailing what somebody's trying to build. As you say, there's a Jenga situation. They've just lost a guy who scores 30 goals a season.
It wasn't working under Conte and it wasn't working under Mourinho either.
Yeah, and this is where Ange is different. He's got a different mentality. He brings players on side. It's not Conte. It was almost Conte's contempt of his own players.
That's what I felt.
We know what Mourinho's like. He blows hot and cold, but I think they'll respond.
So you think he's going to be a success?
No, I don't think.
Depends how you want it. What is success at Spurs?
Lasting longer than 2 years without winning anything.
2 years is long for anything. Even if
nobody lasts 2 years
is long for anything.
No, but 2 years is really long for Spurs. That's my point.
I think he gets, without doubt, he gets a season, and then I think when you get to the end of the season, you judge.
As long as it's not a disaster.
Just out of curiosity, as we were talking about coefficients and how we sometimes...
Anyway, do you know who gets manager sacked? Fans get manager sacked. See if the support like what they're seeing, he stays in the job.
Yeah, okay.
You're talking about managers. Look at Neil Lennon. We're talking about him earlier on. Look how quickly it turned. See when Celtic lost that first game against Rangers, the first derby against Rangers. See the number of people that wanted him out the door. They'd won 9 and drawn 1 of their previous 10 games, and that was the 11th game of the season. They wanted him out the door.
Van Bronckhorst lost to if you take Celtic out of the equation, and I know you can't take Celtic, he lost to St Johnstone, that was it.
I know, but to be fair, I was at St Mirren the day. They did look gone. They were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. Rangers were turgid, and I thought to myself, he had that usual what I call the manager's 1,000 yards. There's no ideas left. I'm going.
See when you're watching it, you know it. You feel it.
Absolutely.
There's a kind of dead man walking.
It's almost like sometimes you almost see it.
Look, isn't it? Yeah, I've got to ask you this. Out of it all, we talk about Celtic and Rangers in Europe, and my apologies to other fans of other clubs who want to sample, European football. I want to see a Hibs.
I'd love it.
I want to see a Hearts. I want to see Aberdeen. I'm looking at this. Between 2008 and 2022, Celtic and Rangers are the only clubs to play group stage European football until Hearts broke the sequence in the Europa League last season.
Only because the Rangers getting Scottish football and Celtic. Absolutely. It was almost kind of eachy-peachy in terms of it. Rangers contributed more coefficient points to getting Scotland breaking the top 10. And once you break the top 10, then a third, inevitably a third team gets group stage football.
Which is fine, but Aberdeen played in the UEFA Cup in season 07-08. They played Atletico Madrid, Copenhagen, Lokomotiv Moscow, Panathinaikos. They played Bayern Munich in that knockout stage as well. you want those days back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different for us.
That almost seems like a different era. The team outside of Celtic Rangers could have a run like that.
Yeah, I don't want to seem like a fuddy-duddy, but there were times when all of us, maybe not you, Alison, but there's, for us three, you know,
Steady. I think I'm as old as you two.
Aberdeen and Dundee United in European football.
Absolutely. I mean, but the thing, but again, goes back to all this. There's no secret. One thing was we had better domestic players, and we could talk about that all day. Was it playing out in the streets? Was the teachers' strike? Was it because both Aberdeen and Dundee United of those days, one was on the brink of a European Cup final, and the other one won a European trophy, beating Bayern Munich en route, and then Real Madrid in the final. They were both Scottish teams. They were massively. I mean, there was players that came in and out. European players came in and out. I always think of the great player Varga and all that. But they were Scottish players playing it. But I go back to the point again, is that wouldn't be allowed to happen.
No.
I mean, Jim McLean, for example, had them on 10-year contracts and things like that.
Don't knock that. Chelsea have got some of the money.
But they're paying them. You look at it now, honestly you look at it now and you say to yourself, oh, Aberdeen got a terrible result, or someone's got a terrible result in Europe, and you say, yeah, but if Forest Green were playing in Europe, how would they get on? And you say, well, you bring up Forest Green with Aberdeen, you say, because in many ways their wage structure won't be too different.
Well, you know, like you're talking about geekery, but I actually did a piece last year, sad that I am. I calculated what the 5-year coefficient would be if there'd been no Celtic Rangers. So I replaced Celtic Rangers with what I gave was the best result that any other Scottish team had. The two best results that they'd got, so I almost inflated what the two that would replace Celtic Rangers, and you know where we ended up? We ended up 39th, one place above the League of Ireland.
Yeah,
like 39th out of 55. Yeah. That's the reality of it.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it.
And by the way, can I just say something to you?
Too much time in my hands.
No, not the
idea. Spend more time with my kids.
That's why we asked you today. I understand where you're coming from. That the ultimate thing is there's no point in us, belittling your game. We know where we are. But all of Europe has the same kind of a structural problems that we have. Well, they have 1 and 2. Bayern Munich have won the league 11 times in the last, what is it, 11 years?
11 years. So tell me. But and the other thing about it, Peter, going further down the line, is that all of Europe is in turmoil because of the English Premier League. Real Madrid and Barcelona are in turmoil. This is why the Super League, Real Madrid and Barcelona are saying, how can we compete with this mob across the channel? Yeah. So, and by the way, we're moving into another thing where the Premier League might be saying in the next couple of years, how can we compete with Saudi, with Qatar, with
that's
UAE?
Why I thought Gary Neville's comment was absolutely laughable.
It was
when he actually came
extraordinary.
Out. It was ridiculous.
It's like, how blinkered are you?
Yeah.
How bloody blinkered are you?
Yeah, it was a question of,
we shouldn't deal with these. We shouldn't. The English clubs shouldn't deal with any of the Saudi Arabian clubs because of the human rights record. It's like, hold on a minute. One of your English clubs is a Saudi Arabian club. Yeah. So nobody should buy or sell players with Newcastle.
Which brings me nicely to the point, which is, of course, and I'm not taking any moral high ground here, you, because I just don't believe there's a sporting integrity left. It might be at the bottom end of the barrel where people still have the integrity and still, look back to the great Halcyon days, or people still have faith in a system where you can go and watch people who'll stay on and play for a certain club. But right now, we're looking at sports washing and accusing the Saudi Arabian state of trying to not only buy players but try and, put a smoke screen up to their human rights issues, which everybody's talking about. But slowly but surely, whether it's golf, whether it's football, whether it eventually becomes tennis or whatever, they are buying up tournaments, they are buying up players, and they have them. The reason why I think they're buying up the players to really make their league strong is because I think they want to be a real force in the Club World Cup. Absolutely. And then they want the World Cup
You see,
They want it 2030,
2030, which they'll get the World Cup 2030.
Yeah.
They'll get that.
It's Greece and who is it? It's the three
There's a joint bid with a couple of
joint
these.
bid with Greece and who else? I was reading it yesterday.
See the thing about sports washing. I've been in the Middle East and I've talked to Saudis about in their league, and I've talked to the people. They would look about sports washing and look through your eyes and go, what about sports washing? They don't give a toss.
Yeah.
Sports washing is all about PR, as if the Saudis want to make themselves look good in the eyes of the world.
They do.
They don't.
But they do. Why would the government? Why would the government buy 4 clubs essentially?
Well, I'll tell you
give them a gift of 500 million.
It's going to have to do with PR. They don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I'll tell you why they don't care about this, because they take people in to embassies and chop them up with, and so they know these are really.
Why did you never go in there? Saudi Arabian embassy. That's all I favour.
Yeah.
But they know these are people who are really intelligent people. They know that they won't change the views of Saudi Arabia by buying football. The reason that they're putting a lot of money into football is a post-fossil fuel economy.
They need to diversify.
They're sitting there and saying, well, every conversation in the Gulf now, where you're sitting in a hotel in Qatar, or you're on a plane in Dubai, or you're talking to Saudi Arabian businessmen, is where will we be in 2070? That's they're not talking about what we're getting for the messages anymore, or who we playing in Saudi. Where will we be in 2070? And part of the Saudi plan is, you've seen Dubai's said to herself, where we'll be. We want to be a tourist destination, we want to be that. Qatar's got its own plans, which will be really interesting. And Saudi said, you know what? We want to be the place where everybody comes to sport. Because see, the next thing they're going to do, they're going to take over tennis. They've taken over golf, and golf is bowed before them. All the talk, they're taking over football, and feels go, oh, it's not going to happen. You go,
it's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening.
The reason why I'm saying that, and the latest guy is Neymar. Here's the list of some of the players that have gone. It's quite frightening, actually. One of our broadcast journalists put in Fashion Sakala just because he's a big Rangers fan and he wanted to highlight they've lost somebody that they shouldn't have lost. But Neymar's there, Ruben Neves, Milinkovic, Koulibaly, Jordan Henderson, of all people, who was making a strong stance only a year ago, suddenly moved for the money. Moussa Dembele, even Jack Henry's over there. But if you look at them, Mahrez, Firmino, Mendy, Jota's there, Benzema for me, and N'Golo Kante are just taking a wedge at the last tail end of their career. But nevertheless, there'll be more and more of what I would call blue chip players in their prime, because they quite simply can go there for 2 or 3 years, say to their family, by the way, even if we never kicked a ball again, you, the kids, their kids, and their other kids are all set forever, aren't they?
It's interesting that Jota is the youngest. By some margin, he's the youngest player to go. I think, Sakala's a couple of years older than him, but he's still the youngest player. They haven't really got anybody else.
They've gone for an
23, 24.
But should we be? There's no way we can take the moral high ground on this, because of obviously we only have to look at the UK's history to look at how we deal with other countries. But as far as sports washing is concerned, you could go back to Germany and look at the Olympics at that time, and how they wanted to try and portray themselves as this forward-thinking, brilliant Aryan race. Didn't quite go according to plan with Jesse Owens, but South Africa, Zaire, take the money, in comes George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. I was looking at all these things. Qatar, which was the biggest for me in the last decade, the biggest, that is so blatant.
And the greatest World Cup of all time, by the parameters that the organisers and the franchise holders hold dear. You can have all your Gary Nevilles and your Rio Ferdinands and your Ollie Holtz of the Daily Mail, what are on in the press about it.
And me had what
are on plenty. FIFA sit there and say, do you know what? It was the greatest World Cup of all time. Why? No trouble, nothing at all. Great spectacle. Best days as well. £5 billion into the FIFA coffers.
With all due respect,
£5 billion.
Can I just interject there with that one line that you said? there was no trouble, which reminds me of, I don't know if you can remember.
No English fans.
No, I'm not. Listen, Scots fans at times have been slightly suspect, not necessarily Tartan Army, but it reminds me of that Scarf cartoon in the Sunday Times. I think it was the 80s, and it's the Ayatollah Khomeini, and he's addressing the crowd, and he said, "Would anybody else who disagrees with me, please raise your remaining arm."
But this is the thing about the Arab thing. If you talk to Arabs, for example, they look at us dumbfounded at our criticisms of them. They do. They go, "What are you talking about?"
It's hypocrisy.
The hypocrisy is incredible. Like you're talking about. You say to yourself, "Oh, this terrible case of Khashoggi taken into an embassy and dismembered." Barack Obama sends a drone out to kill the leader of the Iranian leadership, or takes it, and oops, sorry, missed that Iranian dissident. But we'll just say 25 people have died at a wedding. I know. So the hypocrisy about it is just stunning.
There's still basic human rights here. You know, LGBTQ plus rights. Like these are absolutely trashed.
But they were trashed here as well. See, when we had the World Cup here, we were sending homosexuals to jail.
What is 66? It's 66.
So it was all right in 66?
No, it wasn't all right in 66.
But why we had the World Cup in 66 and it went ahead? It was all right to, it was...
I think the general consensus is everybody thinks that we've all moved on. My problem with of course, there are certain areas where we haven't moved on, and that's a whole different Journos podcast, but my problem with it is that it was so blatant, that the treatment of women.
Yes.
And that's why human rights activists were rightly pointing out, apart from anything else, all of them justifiable for being angry that you're going to let football just completely and utterly whitewash the rights of women.
Do you know what they should do? Do you know what they should do? Do you know this would be a start? Just like major slams in tennis, you should somehow play the men and the women's World Cup simultaneously, almost like the Olympics, if you like. You play it, or like you have the Paralympics 2 weeks after it, and then see if Saudi Arabia wants the bloody World Cup. Yes. Then see if Qatar will host a World Cup with all the women.
But they would. They played professional football. Women's football was played in Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
And Iran.
So why wouldn't they?
They weren't allowing women to attend games until a few years ago.
Aye, but we're talking about now. You keep saying we're talking, and I mean, we had a World Cup when we were jailing homosexuals. We're going to have a World Cup, for example. I'm just going to wait and hear all the great journalistic articles.
Well, how come we haven't got Saudi Arabia buying up women's players?
Because that's not where the money is. Why have you not got? Because they're going where the money is. They're trying to corral the market at the top end of sport. By the way, they'll buy. See, when they go into tennis, they'll buy women's tennis players.
Yeah, absolutely.
The point I'm trying to make in the way of it is, it's not a sports washing. It's a commercial decision. It's all about business. They don't care what we think of them.
That's in fine with the sports washing.
I don't think so. But anyway,
they want to diversify, so they want a place where.
But here's my point. Because I was over there a few times in Qatar and I was talking to people, and I was really impressed.
Because you've been bought as well.
No, what a terrible thing to say, anybody. What a terrible thing to say that you could be bought. What a terrible thing to say. Seriously. Why would you say that?
Because why would you go there?
Because to find out what it was like, because I'm a journalist. Why would you not go?
Why would you pay for it yourself?
Yes, I did. And I paid for it through, I got my flights for nothing, declared that in every article I wrote, paid for every penny that was out there, went to the World Cup, paid every single penny at the World Cup, including flights, to find out what it was like. I'm a journalist. I've got to find out what things are like.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you're going to have a World Cup in 1926, but the place is going to be much worse than Qatar.
2026, you mean?
2026.
Yeah.
It's going to be much worse, and nobody's going to complain.
Which is?
America. You've got a place in America where human rights, women's rights, are trash.
The abortion laws. It's a good.
Wait a minute. I'm continuing.
You're on a rant.
Yeah, I'm on a rant. So women's rights are trash.
Yep.
What about homosexuals? They get shot in nightclubs. Can you imagine?
They don't get shot by the government.
No.
Well,
Let me finish.
I know the police shoot.
Can you imagine if people would say,
persons of
you're
colour.
going to Qatar for the World Cup, last month 26 homosexuals were shot in a nightclub.
Yeah.
Quite. Third thing is, it's going to be in a nation which is run by narcotic cartels. This is, right?
Well, that's your assertion of it.
No, but it is.
No, but-
Mexico's run by narcotic cartels.
But I mean, I'm sure there's a. I'm sure there's a.
There's veneers. So what is
I'm
it?
sure there are levels
So
of
what if
people
you're
who
run
can
by
argue
despotic-
every part of it. I think the strongest argument, which I think a lot of people are looking at and saying there is a level of hypocrisy, is exactly what you're mentioning with America.
Absolutely. Of course there is.
You know,
Of course there always
but
is.
by the way,
But we can't be.
I actually thought to myself, we'll write down our top 10 but favourite players, and all of a sudden, and see when you were in the mid-argument there, I was going to say, is that Cashmere
gonna hit me?
jacket?
Is he going to hit me?
But there's nothing worse you can say to a journalist
But it
that you've been
becomes
bought
very-
off.
Oh, it's a
can't-
joke. It was a
No,
joke.
but it's not funny.
No, but listen to this.
They laughed.
No, I don't listen to this point. The point is, it's not that. I think the main thing about the whole thing is that I'm trying to get across with it is the hypocrisy. Is the hypocrisy of us all, whether it's a tournament out in Saudi Arabia, what they're doing at the moment, what we witness when our best players are cherry picked to England.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
The whole thing is that money now is the driving force to anybody. There's no morals left.
No.
It's always been that way. I
There's
don't think
never
it's
been any
different.
morals. It's like, it's a big problem I had with the Arab thing. I thought it was racist, right? Because the amount of Western, and it was purely Western, the amount of Western arguments against the Qatar Cup was greater than any other World Cup ever, right?
Yeah.
And if you went round the world and you're asking African nations, even North American and South American nations about it, they didn't have the same problems as we did about it.
Yeah, and of course, listen, let's not forget, we have a Prime Minister now in the United Kingdom who is openly courting the Crown Prince while everybody else in human rights is questioning that whole
We sent
government.
£800 billion of trade to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Sending Jordan Henderson for 700 grand a week is not the big story.
Yeah, can I just say something? We should have added Laura Kuensberg and David Dimbleby to this show.
The great thing is, though, Peter, the point I'm trying to make is that football doesn't exist in a vacuum, particularly now.
No.
Football is about not only the culture of the country, but the future of the country. Football in Saudi Arabia is now part of a thought-out strategy by big brains.
Yes.
No kid-on brains, big brains saying,
Yeah.
where do we go post-fossil fuel?
Yeah.
Fossil fuel. That's it.
Don't bring peace on it.
Then you're talking about human rights.
Yeah.
Where do we go after? That's what the argument's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen,
No. I mean, nobody's denying that, but there are still basic human rights.
To you there are. And to me, but maybe not to them.
yeah, it depends.
Well, that's what I still think we shouldn't. I still think we shouldn't have these in 2023 and beyond. We shouldn't host the World Cup in any country that it's where homosexuality is illegal, for instance.
So that would be a European World Cup.
No, it's like it's mostly African. You couldn't go to many places in Africa or the Middle East. But you can go to plenty of other countries.
But I think
we should have a certain bar.
But what
you
if the
should be able to
Africans
love
go-
who you love.
I agree with. But what if the Africans and the Arabians who've got a vote in FIFA said, do you know what? We agree with that. It's not embarrassing. I don't think we should go to any nation that has food banks or doesn't allow refugees.
Well, then we probably couldn't go to anywhere.
Exactly.
Well, no, my point.
That's my point.
My point here, just to finish that discussion, is you say they shouldn't have anybody. And your argument, which I think is a valid one, is it depends on what end of the bridge you are. If you're on one end of the bridge where they say that's their normal, they don't care what way they're going to run their country, and they're not going to be dictated to by you, a country which has a history of colonising most of the world.
I know
what I mean?
know.
So we can't, let's not just go to the nearsighted, the last 20 years. We can go back, and that's where I think the hypocrisy. politics, sport, it is all intertwined.
Well,
and sadly now it's coming to the forefront because money is the driving force on it. So I think your point, and I always say this, you know, when I have an argument with my wife and I say, listen, remember, our normal is not necessarily someone else's normal.
Well, you
and
come,
this is,
exactly, and especially when you say, it becomes polar. They think something's wrong, right? They think it's wrong, it's sinful, it's wrong. We say, it's not sinful. What do they say? They'll go, it is sinful. We go, it's not sinful. Where is the meaning going?
There's no line on it. And again, it goes back to your culture, your upbringing, your beliefs. The whole thing is intertwined. But unfortunately for us, we are arguing a point which is basically infiltrating the game that we work in. You know,
going that way. I mean, Peter, the whole thing now. See, like this, the thing I chortle is, but let's leave politics and sport aside. Politics and sport has never been different. Never been different. And the whole thing is to reiterate this point now, that sport now, for many nations in the world and for the Gulf states, is now their focus. This is where they want to make their money.
Yeah, listen, it's a great argument, and of course the other thing about it is we all want to argue passionately about certain aspects of it that we firmly believe are right and wrong, but some countries don't believe that what we are dictating to them is right and wrong, and they'll drive on, and especially if they've got money, and money at the moment is the driving force in the sport. Just before we finish, what an opening Journos podcast, Sally. I thought we'd do our top 10 greatest players of all time.
Right.
I'll give you the 10 that I've put in my own order.
Right.
Of what I think are top 10 greatest. I couldn't put my top 10 favourite greatest world players because people would start throwing things at, you know, at the telly going, wait a minute, you can't have Danny McGrain and Kenny Dalglish in this. So I'm going. So I've got Pelé as number one because I just do not believe that you can take him away from his number one position for me, which is because he played in the World Cup at 17 in one of the greatest teams of, you know, arguably one of the greatest teams of that era, and he still was able to get into it. 3 World Cups, and had he not had a dictatorship in Brazil at the time, he would have been able to leave and play in Europe.
Yep.
The state stopped him. I've got Messi at number 2, I've got Maradona at 3, I've got Cruyff at 4, I've got the Portuguese Ronaldo at 5, his stats are incredible. And then the next 5 is Franz Beckenbauer, Zidane, the Brazilian Ronaldo, and then Di Stefano and Platini. There's a 10.
I'll go Maradona, and I go for Maradona for one because Maradona got fairly mediocre teams over the line. Maradona, if you look at the 86 team, I believe Maradona had been Scotland. We would have won the World Cup in 1986.
Yeah.
That he was that good.
Yep.
He, up until last season, in the whole history of Napoli, 100-year history of Napoli, he's only won the championship twice, both times with Maradona. I think he stands above the likes of Messi and others because he could have played in every era. Messi couldn't. Messi couldn't have played in Maradona's era physically. It would have lasted the season, and they would have been taking him off and putting him in a jigsaw box. That's not his fault, but he couldn't play in all that. So I would go Maradona, and it's with some great regret because Pelé too. I agree with Pelé. Is people forget how good Pelé is. The downside of Pelé is Pelé played in great teams. The 1970 team.
You don't have to get any a great team.
I know, but just the Maradona drag teams over the line. Pelé could luxuriate in a great team.
Yeah.
Pelé could play with a Tostão, a Gerson, a Rivellino, a Clodoaldo and all that. But he was absolutely terrific and physically very strong. So he'd number 2. Cruyff 3, because of Cruyff's significance in the world as a player, as a coach who changed the game, completely changed the game, and as a mentor to future coaches. I think most of what happens in world football, not most, but a lot of what happens in world football in 2023 is down to Johan Cruyff in the 80s.
Yeah.
Messi at 4 for obvious reasons. Brazilian Ronaldo at 5 because I think he gets really underrated. Brazilian Ronaldo.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And the other Portuguese Ronaldo at 6. again, because he's just a terrific player, had everything. Again, getting slightly downgraded.
Yes,
Portuguese Ronaldo now, but I think history all
because of Qatar, people just the recency.
Yep. Best.
That's what I'm like to say here.
I know that's exactly what I'm
Just say something.
thinking.
Hurry up, we're running out of time. You've got 5 minutes left.
Best at 7.
Yep.
Third best.
Because I watched. I'm older, and I could watch them live, only for Northern Ireland, and it was like for Northern Ireland, who were a decent team as well, decent players at that time. He just so something. Gianni Rivera 8, because he's the best player in an opposition side I've ever seen at Celtic Park.
Gianni Rivera.
Yep.
Yeah.
Italian midfield player.
You've been nobbled by the Italian FA, say that.
Rivera played for AC Milan.
Don't give us the lowdown. Give us 9 and 10.
9 and 10. Puskas, and I'm reluctant to put him in because he should maybe be number 1. And I've done this in players that I actually watched, but Puskas was just game changing with Di Stefano. And 10, Kenny Dalglish, because I think he's underrated as well.
Yeah.
Not here, but underrated.
Mine's is very similar, but I think probably just the order of it. I think I've got Maradona as number 1 for pretty much everything that Hugh just said. But my order is just very is just different. I've got I've got Zidane and Platini in mine too. I've got both Ronaldos. And I actually hate lists like this. I need to be honest. I absolutely loathe
Me too.
top 10s. I think you should just enjoy players on their merits. I think the argument of who's the best is just so
reductive.
I loathe things like this. I just think it's very male.
No, it's not.
You're in a snug bar on a Sunday night.
Have you ever been in Cafficini in the 80s with a Southern Comfort lemonade? You're turning around your mate, you're going, no way, Di Stefano's in at 9. Give it your 10. Give it them 1 to 10 then. Who have you got?
You want the full order
Just give
of
it
it?
1 to
I've
10.
got Maradona, Pele, Messi, Cruyff, Beckenbauer, Di Stefano, Ronaldo, Platini, and I was between a couple. I was between Zidane, the other Ronaldo, and Di Stefano. Right. Because I think I think you should enjoy players. I think you enjoy them at their time, at their minutes. I think the idea that you actually you grade people. I think you could argue you could do that list from turn it upside down. Everyone's top 3 isn't probably going to waver. You can argue whether Pele should be first or Maradona first or Cruyff first for all the reasons that you mentioned. But
some people now that we're talking about generations have Messi first, and I've no argument with that. You listen to Gary Lineker, Messi's first. If you look at what
you can make an argument.
Oh, listen, there's a legitimate one. But with 3 minutes left, we're making an argument for Andrew Smith to come up with his 10.
Can I just
not one Arab player in these 10.
You won't let it go, will you?
You watch.
Go on, I checked out their human rights record. Partly why Maradona's first on me is because he's Che Guevara like tattoo. Because he was a bloody rebel, man. He was a man after my own heart. Okay, and there was something dangerous about Maradona, and he lived certainly a dangerous life. But it's like you said, Maradona get kicked out the butchery Bilbao and all. You get kicked out of Spanish.
Are you willing to look? Are you willing to look over his misdemeanours and just say? Right, okay. I'm just trying to establish. I'm trying to establish Saudi Arabia for you. I'm helping you here. Shut it. Go on.
He's rock and roll, man. He's rock and roll in a way that.
Who's number 2?
Number 2 is Messi. Number 3.
For Messi.
What's that?
2 for Messi.
Yeah, number 3 is Pele. I mean, the thing with Messi is he did it. Ultimately, he did it. He did it all. He did, and I know, but also it's sometimes forgotten about what a great team he played in. Because he was playing with the backbone of the Spanish team, who became the first team in modern day history to win 3 straight.
That's a great point.
Xavi and Iniesta.
Yeah.
That's what you need to say.
I know. So Pele 3rd for all the reasons. And then Cruyff 4th for as Hugh said. I mean, nobody in any of our lists has had a greater impact in the game, and because of that kind of that he was another kind of almost a rock and roll star in the sense
he's fag at half time.
Yeah. And he was the estate in terms of footballers.
And he went against General Franco.
Oh, exactly. Although, did he really no go for those reasons and all that? You know what I mean? Because he refused to go to Argentina.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, there was a lot of talk.
Yeah, but 1974 to go and join Barcelona.
Oh, right,
was a
sorry.
big thing.
Yep. Sorry. I thought you meant because he never went to the 78 World Cup.
No.
You know, because of the junta.
Yeah.
That's what you said. And Zidane, like for me, it's just that again, that kind of balletic grace for a guy who's 6 foot. I think 6'2".
Yeah.
You know, and his ability, and because you can't help it, because we were at Hampden that night and we saw one of the great European Cup final goals.
Great.
That's a memory I tell my boy at 13, who's constantly, who hates me because, like Alisson, he says to me, Dad, who do you think's the greatest player? What's the greatest game? And I say, I don't know. He says, what do you mean you don't know? I said, I don't know. What's your favourite Marvel film? I'm not sure. What do you mean you're not sure? Because it changes. You know, like
But the thing about it is, once your boy hears this podcast, I'll not be happy with you and you're arguing over Saudi Arabia. Give me your five, we're running out of time.
So Zidane, I think, did I say Zidane?
Yeah, so your next five.
You know, like, no, but Zidane, I remember speaking to someone, and I told a journalist, and because they've got a beautiful way about them, and I said, you know, what do you think it is about Zidane? He said, Zidane is the sun around which all other moons revolve. And I always thought it was a beautiful line. It's a beautiful line. Right, Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Beckenbauer, Di Stefano. Now, I've never seen Di Stefano, but sometimes you have to accept the canon or whatever. You have to accept that people know, people that were around know.
And your final two?
And my final two was Brazilian Ronaldo and Iniesta. Again, the most underrated modern day great.
I agree with you. We've run out of time. What an opening Journos show. If the rest of them are like this one, we're in for an absolute howitzer, and of course a few governments looking into our backgrounds. All I can say is Hugh McDonald is the sun which other planets have just moved around on today's programme. Some arguing, some not, but nevertheless it's been an absolute joy. Thanks to Ali, thanks to Andrew for coming in as well, and Hugh McDonald. And don't forget, every week, every now and then, Ali and Hugh will be in here with special guests hosting the show. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it, not only on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel, but you'll get it on the podcast as well. From everyone here, thank you for listening and watching.